Hi all, I have yet another amazing game to show you of Leela Chess. So Leela is playing against Fire 7.1 here. The time control is the Fast and Furious 40 moves per 2 minutes with a 2-second increment per move. So this game is by David Grosvenor. D4, knight f6 from Fire. Leela plays c4. We go into the Gruenfeld variation, so d5. This is the book moves given, and this is the end of the book. Leela chooses bishop b takes c3 here, and actually in this game plays bishop c4, the classical variation, instead of knight f3, which is the modern exchange variation. So this is the classic bishop c4, which is used in, for example, the Karpov-Kasparov World Championship matches. So black castled here, knight e2. Now knight c6, this is less usual than c5. Karpov-Kasparov matches usually were c5 from here, and then this kind of continuation was very interesting, and that became all the rage. Actually, that became trendy. But here knight c6 was played by Fire. White castles, knight a5, bishop d3, b6, bishop g5, bishop b7, queen d2, c5, and now rook ad1, just ignoring the pressure on d4. Black does take on d4, c takes, and here plays rook c8, and there is a slightly uncomfortable c4 square for white to handle, as well as the uncomfortable, seemingly uncomfortable pressure on d4. In this position, if black had taken, you might be asking, then actually bishop takes e7 here is strong. This situation with queen g5, there's no real backfire on e4. It's the dark squares which are the worser issue. The tactical h6 to try and lure the queen away from the bishop. This fails actually to queen takes here, and we have a very sharp line threatening classic check and mating scenario. Just to put that on the board, or winning the queen. But this is a mating net if the queen's not holding h8 as well. Now here, let's just take this for a position. e5 here, queen takes to guard against being mated, but then check, and this move just wins basically. Well, wins material, because here it's just winning material, exchange up. Otherwise, yeah, if here, then that's another classic checkmating well, pattern here. The rook stopping the king's escape. So there's all sorts of nice lines there if black's greedy, but rook c8, not greedy at the moment. It's here after h4. the threat of the form pawn, is it stronger than the execution? Nimzovich's favourite saying was, the threat is often stronger than the execution, something like that. But the threat of the form pawn with h5, h6, is this such a serious threat? We have bishop takes d4 played now. Let's see if black didn't take on d4, because it does seem to weaken the dark squares. h5, queen d7, h6, let's install the form pawn and see what happens here. Rook c1 covers c4, contests the c file. Say there's a move like this. Here, it looks as though white is in a comfortable position, actually. Any attempt to win that form pawn with g5 could lead to big trouble here. This is awkward after d5, hitting f6, and it is a troublesome position for black with the centre here and pressure generally. You can see my pinned comment in the comments section to check out the variations a bit more as well. Okay, so black didn't want to go for this calm move. Black played bishop takes d4, very committal. Very, very committal. There's no stepping back from this. The dark squares have been compromised. Bishop takes e7 here. Bishop a3. But Fire must have judged in its calculations, in its short-term calculations, this would be an interesting position. Knight c4, perhaps in its favour even. If the big threat is bishop b2 here, actually, so if that is allowed, then that's very bad news after bishop b2, striking across all the dark squares. You can imagine, of course, this is destructive. Winning the queen here because of that check. That sort of thing is highly destructive. So knight c4 stops bishop b2. We have bishop takes c4. The queen has to take, because otherwise losing material, clearly. Losing the rook down. So the queen takes, f3, queen a4, and this looks uncomfortable because it's hitting the bishop, and rook c2. So this does seem as though there's compensation, and the argument is sometimes, well, you know, the best move in the position might not be intuitively a long-term thing. It might just work because it works in that particular position. Now Leela here plays queen e3 to protect the bishop. We do have this invasory rook c2, and has fire got a point or not is the question, because a2 under fire now from fire. We have rook d4, queen a5, rook c1 offering the a2 pawn. Is the house on fire here? Taking a pawn over here when the house is on fire. Let's see. Bishop b4 is played. Queen e5. Bishop c3. We have queen c5. There are some dangerous ideas, clearly, like rook d8 maybe on the cards, hitting the queen. The queen gets out of the firing lane, kind of pinning the rook. That's kind of unpinned here with queen f4. And it looks as though in some cases queen f6 might be useful. Bishop c6. Now here, queen f6 is not useful here in this particular instance. On queen f6 it can be repulsed with rook e6. Say here that's just exchange of queens. And what else? If check here, then just actually bishop e8. Don't even need to use the rook. And this is even at least. So king h2 was played. That looks like a kind of Magnus Carlsen type move, improving the king slightly before an attack. So keeping the pressure on. Queen e5, and Leela actually welcomes the exchange of queens. A pawn down. Now, rook d8 check doesn't do anything. The rook just goes back supported by the bishop. And that would be fine for black. So what is the point here? Now this is really neat. It seems Leela's found a way to get into black's first rank. The first step is bishop b4 hitting the bishop. And the bishop's also striking across a key diagonal. Very, very useful, the f8 square here. We have rook e6. Yeah, clearly the bishop's hanging here, right? So just to put that on the board, there's no... yeah, the bishop has to be protected as a priority. So we have rook e6. Bishop e8, by the way, is letting the rooks come in with rook d8, nasty pin. And if here, bishop d6 with tempo, and then crashing through is winning. That's the kind of idealistic scenario White is aiming for. But can it be achieved here in this move order? Check. Bishop f8 check, bringing the king out to play, because here then there's actually I believe there's rook takes c6 here, is crushing for that mating net. So the king's brought out to play, but something has to tilt the equation here, because how is this rook ever going to get access to the first rank? How is this pressure going to be increased, in fact? Isn't this shielding, and black in the long term can just push this a pawn and queen if White's not going to do anything? Can you guess what Leela played in this position? A very attacking move in its own right. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, it does tilt the kind of mathematical chess equation we have on the board here. The king is a fighting piece. King g3. It's got the 2-move threat of king f4, and note g5 is suppressed with the h pawn, and then e5, and because there's no squares really, rook takes, and rook takes c6. That's the idea. King f4, e5, and black's playing this move against that kind of thing, pinning the pawn if the king goes to f4 in advance, staying one step ahead, just to put that on the board. If a5, king f4, big threat e5, just to put it on the board. This is a disaster to show on the board. Okay, so sensible, rook a4. Now we have bishop h6. And there does seem to be some weaving elements going on here. On king f4, it doesn't really do anything, h5 for example. So bishop h6 actually stops the h pawn, by the way. And also prepares bishop g5 check. So what's the point of that? Bishop g5 check. And there's a really neat point here expressed in this position, which is based on the dark squares, and the rook's really wanting to come in to black's position to help weave a mating net. It's e5. It threatens bishop f6 check now. This way is more destructive and more weaving a mating net than before. Black played bishop e8. Let's see what's happening. Why bishop e8? Why? Because that makes way, for the rooks, doesn't it? If rook b4, let's have a look. Check. Here, rook g8 is very scary. a4, for example, check. And this position, king h3 for g4 mating. So, for example, like this, just mating. So that's a kind of scary scenario. And also here, after bishop e8, instead of bishop e8, if b5 as an example, check, rook g8, check, and then here is mating, black by force. So you can see some mate weaving scenarios emerging. So it seems bishop e8 trying to offer resistance, but the rooks have found a way to break through, basically. So both rooks now on the 8th. Picture postcard, strategic, winning position and tactical, mixing, crashing through the rooks, weakened dark squares, king safety aspects. A good Instagram position. If you want to Instagram this, hash kingscrusher, hash KC chess, hash Leela chess, hash AI, hash neural network. Yeah, use a few hashes. Okay, this is the position which is it's crushing. What can black do? This is the position which breaks black. Otherwise, there's going to be a mating net woven. Black plays rook takes e5, just giving up the bishop. So this bishop's taken, and it's just a bishop up, really. And in fact, the pawns are on dark squares, available for being skewered. So bishop d8, skewering these poor two pawns. Bishop c7 is played first, though, and then taking. So just bishop up, it's end of game. The game continued a little bit. Clearly, it's just a mopping up job now. And ended here, actually. So it's just a mopping up job, king g7. So that was a very, very nice long-term pawn sacrifice to weaken the dark squares. And just when one thought maybe black's holding, it's the king, the threat of the king, coming up the board with e5 check of all things, which disturbed that kind of balance on the chessboard, causing major concessions of the rook crashing through. And then that was it. Wonderful chess. Deep positional pawn sacrifice. So Leela is justifying what we as humans detect as warning signals. She's really demonstrating that these warning signals are for real. If the implementation is really good, you can actually exploit them. Okay, so we as humans were right, after all, to be cautious about such things as losing the fianchettoed bishop. Kasparov has expressed in his annotations that the King's Indian player, for example, should not give up the King's Indian bishop without very, very good reasons in the position. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.